Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Amherst Williams, the Executive Director of the Connecticut League of History Organizations, and welcome to today's info session about Year 2 of the Connecticut Cultural Fund Operating Support Grants. We have with us today Emily Garfinkel, CLHO's Membership and Programs Manager.
Hello, everybody.
Who I'm sure you've all had contact with. Also with us here today, the stars of the show are Scott Wands, the Director of Grants and Programs at Connecticut Humanities, and Leanne Partridge, the Grants and Programs Assistant at Connecticut Humanities, who are going to be telling us all about the Connecticut Cultural Fund Operating Support Grants. Both information about Year 1 closeout and with a special focus on the latest round, Year 2, that has just opened up for applications. They have a presentation plan to kind of walk you through the application and address some common questions that they've been getting already. But we're going to hopefully have basically the second half hour of this hour program for you to raise any questions that you have. If you have questions as we go, both Emily and Leanne are going to be keeping an eye on the chat. So use the chat function to pop your questions in there. As you know, we will be recording this session, and a video will be available on our YouTube channel. And Emily will be following up with a link to that. We'll also be sending it out to all our contacts after the fact with more information about the operating support grants. So thank you so much for being with us today. I'm going to hand things over to Scott and Leanne to get us started. Go ahead, folks.
Thank you, Amherst, and thank you, Emily, for hosting us again for today's info session. And also want to thank our partners in this. The operating support, the Connecticut Cultural Fund Operating Support Grants, is a joint granting program between us at Connecticut Humanities and our colleagues and friends at the Office of the Arts, and especially Liz Shapiro there. This is Year 2 of unprecedented funding that is not just for the arts or just for the humanities folks, but it's for all of our state's museums, performing arts institutions, historical societies, cultural organizations writ large. We had 632 grant recipients last year. As long as you all are still eligible, and by that I mean you haven't lost your IRS status or something goofy happening, you are all eligible and will receive grants again this year. So that's the big thing. It's not a question of if or one organization getting funding and another not. All eligible arts, humanities, history, cultural organizations, all those that got funding in Year 1 and hopefully a lot more that we can grab in Year 2 will get funding, and we'll divide the pot accordingly. We'll show our website. We're going to kind of just walk you through things. We've redone the website. Leanne has done great work in reorganizing stuff on our webpage, so hopefully it's easier to find, and there's sections for people wanting to apply for the new grant or people who want to close out the last grant. We'll walk you through those, and then want to leave ample time for any questions that you have. I think some of the big things that we're getting are now, because we've both made the new application live and people can start filling it out now, as well as the final report live for those organizations that got grants with us last year. We're getting a lot of questions about, do I need to finish my grant and close out before I can start an application? And no, that's not the case. You can start working on both simultaneously, submit them in either order. The big things to make sure is, number one, for the new application for Year 2 funding, we don't miss the application deadline. You can submit it today. You can submit it tomorrow. You can submit it up through 11:59 p.m. on Friday, November 4th. Just do not submit after 11:59 p.m. on November 4th. It will be a much simpler application for returning grantees. If you have answered information previously, you will not need to answer that again, and I'll walk you through. We're basically just getting the data and information that we need to gather since you last applied. So we'll talk about that, but it will be a much simpler application. The other question that we're getting right now is, I've not spent all of my money yet. Should I close out now? No, well, when you've spent all your money, then close out the grant, but do not try to close out if you've not finished expending your award. Some places expended these funds long ago. Others are going to be using these right up until the deadline for use of the funds, which is December 21st of this year. So by all means, you have until December 21st to obligate and spend the funds. Once you've done that, though, you can close out at any time you're ready to do so. And we'll walk through that final report and the questions we're going to ask. If you get to the situation where you're closing out late, and we have not had a chance to review your final report. There might be a little bit of a holdup between notification that you've got a second year of funding and our ability to issue you a contract. So that would be my only reason to encourage folks, if they can spend the funds earlier and close earlier, it'll just clear the decks for year 2, but it will not impact your ability to have year 2 funds. I just can't send a contract and give you funds for year 2 until we've closed out the first year. That's a lot of year 2, year 1 money coming and going. Let's look at the website, talk about a couple of things that I want to highlight with you. Pop your questions up as they come into the chat. Leanne is great about answering them. And then we'll have time for folks to ask things live as we get towards the second half of today's session. But I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to take you to Connecticut Humanities website, which is cthumanities.org. If you go to cthumanities.org, all the stuff you need for grants are under the grants section. On the left, by and large, are things about our granting program, what our funding priorities are, or what grants we've made. The individual grant lines are on the right. And we're talking about the CT Cultural Fund Operating Support Grants. And if you click that, or if you've bookmarked it at home, you'll see that the page is a little bit different now. We have some jump navigation at the top, and you can quickly get to what you're looking for, whether that be information for 23 applicants for the new year of grants. You can jump there, or similar things about just jumping to wanting to apply, information about last year's grant and how to close out, or just seeing who all of our grantees are and the like. But if we jump to FY23 applicants, you will have information organized left to right with accordion tabs here. Basic information about what the program is and what it's for. This, again, if you got grants from us last year and you're still eligible because you haven't lost IRS funding, IRS certification, you are still eligible. But this is to let other places know. And if you are not a museum, a historic house, a historical society, a whole non-exhaustive list here, this is not for you. This is not for the social service organizations. This year, I want to note we have half the funding roughly to distribute that we had last year. Last year, we distributed over $16 million, $16.1 million. This year, we have $8.5 million. Our funding basically was halved from year 2 to year 1, from year 1 to year 2. So what we have done is we've made sure that the smaller organizations are not impacted as direly from their awards. We've not cut the bottom award. The least amount of funding you'll get continues to be $5,000. We did not have that to $2,500 for this year. So if you got a small award last year, your award is probably going to be pretty similar this year. We did drop the ceiling from $500,000 to $250,000, but we only had something like 9 organizations total that got funding above $250,000 last year anyway. What this will do is hopefully spread the burden a little bit more equitably across organizations and not cut the small organizations as direly. Eligibility and awards. The one thing to note here that is different from last year is we are not allowing fiscally sponsored organizations to receive grants. So if you are a 501c3 in Connecticut, you are a Connecticut recognized tribe, you are a Connecticut state museum, university museum, you are all still eligible. But if you did not have the ability to apply it because you're not any of those things, you will not be able to apply directly this year unless you do want to seek 501c3 status. And we will accept proof that you have either applied to the IRS and gotten recognition with less than a year, or you've at least applied and have some proof of application up through November 4th. So if you are an organization that is still fairly new and you want to access these funds, you will need to consider becoming a 501c3 status no later than November 4th to be able to apply directly. All of the awards, as you know from last year, are paid in 2 installments. The first 75% at the time of contract, and once you've completed our grantee survey with Susie Wilkening, and the last quarter when you have completed the final report and done the follow-up survey. So that's another good reason, if you can close out your last grant, to do so. Once you close it out, we'll get you that last 25% of year 1 funding. Our guidelines and application can be previewed here. You can preview the grant guidelines and go into all the specifics about what's allowable. These are going to be pretty identical to last year with the changes we already highlighted about not allowing fiscal sponsors and the top award being halved to $250,000. But you can also see we have two different previews of applications, what your application will look like if you're a returning grantee and what your application will look like if you are a new cultural fund applicant. I'm just going to highlight the one for returning because I know many of you are returning. If you click on that, you'll find a PDF of the application and you can see all the questions that we're asking. And there's going to be some big blacked out sections. Those big blacked out sections those are things that you are not going to need to answer. And we've got question branching that will take you by them. There are some eligibility questions at the beginning you're going to have to still fill out to make sure that you are still a cultural organization in good standing with the IRS. And then you'll have some questions here which will determine what questions you see in the application. And if you say, yes, I got operating support last year, it will eliminate all these blacked out sections. If you click no for whatever reason, even if you were a returning grantee, you're still going to see all those questions. So if you got a grant from us last year, please do click yes to that question and it will make your life simpler and you will only get the questions we really need you to answer. And we will have some things that you need to recertify that you are still a 501c3 in good standing. You are still in legal good standing with the Secretary of State's office. You will have, again, you will not see all of these. These are some questions that you will get if you're a 501c3, questions you'll get if you're a municipality, questions you'll get if you're a CT state museum or a university operated museum. And a reminder that the maximum award for university and CT state entities like that is $5,000. If your institution like Yale has more than one qualifying museum and all the Yale museums are applying, they need to fill out separate applications. If you do not fit into any of those, click other and then be in touch with Leanne and we'll figure out what's going on there. And if you are eligible or if you're needing to click a different box above. If you are one of these groups that has just recently received 501c3 status between January 1 and November 4 of this year, we're going to ask you to upload either your IRS determination letter if you have one, or whatever proof of application that you have, whether it be an email or otherwise. The next section will be optional. Have there been any significant changes to your organization's information in the last year? If nothing has changed, you can go by all of those questions and leave them blank. We are going to ask you to verify that your organization's profile is updated, which is a separate thing you need to do. And on that application page, there's steps to click a black pencil icon to your contact tab and make everything sure is right. Please make sure that your mailing address is right. That is where your check is going to go. And we have had several places where the mailing address was not correct anymore, and it just delays us getting your funding to you. So do make sure that your mailing address is where you want it to be. These are those questions, again, that if they're all fine, if your mission statement hasn't changed, your Facebook account URL is not changed, you can just go by all of these questions and move right on to your organizational goals and needs. Here, we're again highlighting what the priorities are for this grant line, and that has not changed. The priorities are still to keep us staffed as a sector or bring on new staff or bring back staff lost to the pandemic, improve our IT and digital infrastructure as a sector, and to support K-12 education. We're going to ask you again to indicate what your top 3 choices would be for how you anticipate using this funding in the next year. This is not a contract. You are not locked into these types of things. In the end, as long as you're spending your grant funds on eligible expenses, you will be fine. This helps us determine what the need is at time of application as we continue to advocate on your behalf. And we are entering another legislative 2-year cycle here. So this is going to be part of the data capture process to help us talk about where the sector is and what its needs are. We still want a little bit more detail. So you've checked some boxes above, a small little narrative block to talk about what your hopes and goals are for this use of funds for the new year. Another block that helps us out, how is this funding helping transform your institution? And then besides more money, what other things could you use? And this is used by us in terms of trainings that we do and resources that we built out and stuff like with Susie Wilkening and data capture over the past year, or other ways that we're going back to the legislature for additional asks. More things you won't need to fill out because you're returning. We do need some budget information for you. These grant awards are based on your organization's budget size and amount of organizational expenses. We want to reaffirm what your organization's fiscal year start date is and end date is. We want your current year's budget that has revenue and expenses detailed. And then let us know what the final numbers are for total expenses and total income for the current year. If you receive any line item funding from the state legislature, we want to know what that is here. The vast majority of you do not. There's only about a dozen or so institutions that do. So if you don't know, by and large, the answer is no. We also want to know what your previous year final numbers were, because when you applied last year, it was a year in progress. We want to know now what your most recently completed at time of application fiscal year numbers were, the final numbers for an upload of the budget, and then the total expenses and total income. And then if there's anything you need us to know because you've had some unusual years, you've changed your fiscal year, your organization's dramatically changed between fiscal years, there's a text box where you can tell us about some of the additional context we need to know about what's been going on at your shop. If you don't have anything else to share, feel free to leave that blank. And that's really it. The rest of it here is a project name. We need a grant title for every grant. This is a field we can't ignore. So you could just say Connecticut Humanities CT Cultural Fund Operating Support Grant. Name of your organization, CT Cultural Fund Operating Support Grant. That's fine. This is not a field for you. We will give you a project number, so don't worry about that. Same thing with first-time applicant. That's a field for us, not for you. You won't even see that on your application. Authorizing signatory. When we issue you a grant contract, whose name do you want to be on it? Who is the person you want to sign this on behalf of your organization? Again, whoever you put here, you will find on your contract. If you need to change this after award, we can do so. It's just going to delay you getting your funds. So think about who you want to be signing, whether it be your executive director or your board president or someone else now. Make sure that that's who you have here. Project director. Who do you want our number one, our first contact to be at your organization about your grant? This is when we've got any questions, we're going to go to first, and communications and reports end up getting assigned to this person. And then fiscal agent. Who is going to be signing off for your organization on the coming and goings of funds? Your fiscal agent and authorizing signatory can be the same person. Your project director and your authorizing signatory can be the same person. Your project director and your fiscal agent cannot. That's a check and balance. We need two different people there to be managing your grant funds and the reporting. We ask for a current year's board list. We do not have actual signatures. It's just a checkbox that signifies that you have read the guidelines and are entering correct information, and then the name of the person that is signing off on the grant. And then an opportunity, if you are not already receiving our monthly grants e-newsletters, to opt in, and we'll add you to our list. Even if you click no, we will continue to email you about this specific grant, but we will only be emailing you about this specific grant or any other grant you have with us, and not be doing our monthly communications, which I encourage you to sign up for because you'll learn about new opportunities and new funding whenever they come around. But we don't want to spam you either. So if you say no, you'll get communications about this grant, but not about our regular communications. So that is largely it for this year. We do have frequently asked questions, which we will continue to add to, and probably add some after today's session. And we already talked about this stuff, about the fact you do not need to complete the final report before applying for a second round of funding. Nothing you say in your final report or application is going to influence your size of your award. It is all based on the size of your organization and your finances, and an equal distribution to all the organizations we have. Last year, everyone got $5,000 plus 5.8025% of their organization's 4-year average operating expenses. This year, it'll be $5,000 plus another percentage of 5 years of average operating expenses, and we'll divide up the pot equally accordingly. Won't go into all of these kind of things, but the number one question is, if you don't see your question answered here and you don't know, email Leanne and I and we'll get you the answer. We'd love it if you check the frequently asked questions first, because inevitably a lot of the stuff that you're wondering about probably can be answered there. But we're always just an email or a phone call away to help you with any questions that you have about the application process. And then last, the same thing for closeout of your year one grant. That application is live. I'm going to go into the final report in a second here. But again, to highlight something I said earlier, no matter what you said you were going to use the funds on at time of application last year, that is not something you're locked into. As long as you're using your funds on eligible expenses, and the ineligible expenses are by and large stuff like gambling at the casino, buying booze, trying to bribe your legislator, it's going to be allowed. Last year, we did have a prohibition in about using it on capital expenses and capital equipment. This year, we are allowing up to $5,000 for those things. By and large, we made exclusions and approved a lot of folks' capital purchases, like a laptop if they needed one for the institution because your computer was old, or you needed some minor things like a dehumidifier or a sump pump because we want to keep your organization, moisture managed. So we just completely removed that and have now in, as long as it's under $5,000, those expenses will be allowed in year two. Let's look at what the final report looks like. If you log into your applicant dashboard, and I'm going to mirror being our grants committee chair, Kathy Fields, and Litchfield Historical Society, when you log into your system, you will end up on your applicant dashboard. If you ever are unsure where you are, you can click the blue house. That gets you to whatever active requests you have. In this case, Litchfield has 2 active requests that Kathy is managing. The CT Summer at the Museum grant program, which many of you have. That final report went live recently. You can close that out at any time now that we're past Labor Day, and please do so. And below that, you will find the Cultural Fund Operating Support section of the panel. You can see the application if you want to go back to that. You can see the follow-up report that you all have done to return your contract. What you're going to want to do is you're going to click the blue edit for your final report, and that will open up the questions that you need to answer. And these are very short. We're not trying to make this an onerous exercise. We remind you that this was your award amount. We're going to want to know how much money you received in our priority category buckets, how much was spent on full-time staff if you have it, how much was spent on part-time staff if you have it, how much was spent on contractors, other people that you've employed but aren't on your payroll, how much was spent on digital initiatives, and how much was spent on K through 12 education. These can be zeros. These can be some amount of funds. This does not need to equal your total budget, because in some cases you might have been doing digital initiatives that were for K through 12. So the sum total of these above might equal or surpass your grant award, and that's fine if there's some overlap there that you were supporting K through 12 education through digital initiatives done by your staff. Enter those same kind of things in multiple buckets if they fit in multiple buckets. We do want line item fund detail below that should not exceed your total grant award amount and should equal your grant award amount for how you actually spent the funds. So in this hypothetical situation, you're an organization that got $23,500. Let us know that you've spent $2,000 on buying 2 new laptops, $20,000 to hire a part-time administrative assistant, $800 for utilities for 1 month, $500 to market your dance program, and $200 stipends for instructors to do that dance program. Let us know detail about all the expenses, and all the expenses totaling your full grant award amount, not just the first 75% that you've received to date, but how you spent the entire award amount. We've got a space to upload some photos that relate to your use of grant funds and the impact they had on your organization. If there are some websites and URLs, you did YouTube links to programs, list them here for us. We are asking you to do an end of year survey with Susie Wilkening. There is a link that is your own unique link that will take you to those survey questions that you have to do. It will take you out of our site, do the survey. Once you finish the survey, come back, click yes. then you're basically done. There's one optional block for anything else you want to share with us that you want us to know one way or the other, and then submit your follow-up. And at that point, you are done with your final report. We are closing out final reports on a weekly basis. So every week we get a report of people that have finished their survey with Susie Wilkening, match it up to those that have completed and submitted their final report in our system. And assuming everything checks out and we don't have any questions, we forward it on weekly to our accounting department to pay out, and checks are going out on a week by week basis. And we'll get you those as soon as we can. We are maybe just a little bit slowed down right now because our staff account is not only trying to do our normal business, but we're in our annual audit. So if we're a little bit delayed, apologies, but we're in audit mode right now. That is a lot of talking for me. I have achieved my goal of trying to get my talking done by 12:30 to leave the second half of this for questions and answers with you all. So with that, I'm going to ask Leanne if there are some specific questions that you've noticed that we want to take, and if people have questions you want to do the hand raise and ask them live, we can do that as well as a way to have a queue going here. And I did just see one question that came in that I'll answer before I even turn it over to Leanne, which was, when will year 2 award announcements be made? Excellent question. So your grants again are due no later than November 4th. We will be notifying everyone of their grant award amount approximately on December 21st. Our board meets on December 20th to approve all the award recommendations that have come to us from the economists at DECD. And we will be starting our notification process on the 21st, hopefully finishing it on the 21st, if not carrying through to the 22nd. And then Leanne and I will turn into pumpkins and take a week off after this. So we'll be monitoring our email, but by and large, we're going to be gone for the holidays after award announcements, and be back in the office after the new year to answer any questions that have popped up.
Scott, there was a request to talk more about the 51% rule. So generally there are questions about eligibility. So if we can talk a little bit more about what are eligible organizations and what does that 51% refer to?
Yeah, and we can talk more individually here, but by and large, if you are a museum, a historical society, a performing arts venue, a presenting arts venue, you are eligible. Do not start worrying about adding up the percentage of your activities. What this is more intended to do is there are a lot of other organizations that their primary purpose in life is not arts, history, humanities, culture. They are a social service organization that does a concert one day a year, and they've got a $1 million budget, but they spend $20,000 on a one time a year concert. This is not intended for those organizations just because they do one small concert a year. There are other organizations that are kind of on the fringe of what we do, and they offer humanities or arts programming from time to time, and are eligible for our other grant lines when they do those humanities projects, let's say. But again, at the end of the day, they are an organization that is involved in doing equitable housing for all. And even though they did a one-time exhibit about housing equity, their main business uses are to have equitable housing in our communities and not to do cultural activities. That is intended as a filter for them and not as a deterrent to you.
Great. Do you want me to start lobbing questions your way, Scott?
Lob some questions my way.
Okay. John asks whether this Zoom session is covering the same ground as the in-person sessions being offered in Bridgeport and Stamford later this month.
By and large, yes, it is intended to serve the same purpose. But if your organization has more one-on-one questions than we can do with, I don't know what the final count is here. I think we have 205 participants on, at least at this moment. Leanne and I will be there for more in-person, on-site guidance. If people want us to walk through an application with them or walk through doing a final report closeout with them, we'll be having our laptops there and we'll be able to give that in-person counseling that you're desiring. If all of your questions have been answered and you're good closing out and applying, you're fine and you don't need to go there. There's not going to be anything new that you'll learn there that you didn't learn here today.
Great. I think, Leanne, if you could put some information about when those sessions are and where they are located in case people want to attend those, that would be really great.
Yeah, we're still setting up more of those. So today is the very first of these. And then we're working with a lot of the regional service organizations, your local arts councils. We have some set up with the Southeastern Connecticut Cultural Coalition right now. We have some set up with the Cultural Alliance of Fairfield County. We will be reaching out and working with all of the others to do more regional activities as they come. We've done some with the Wyndham area organizations as well, with the Wyndham Chamber of Commerce, but those are the only ones on the books. The link that Leanne is sharing is something that we will keep adding more to as they come online.
Yeah, and for those of you who are joining us on the phone, if you go to the Connecticut Humanities website and the page about the Connecticut Cultural Fund operating support grants, I believe you will be able to find information about all the information sessions that are being held there.
There's a big green banner at the top of that page with information about our info sessions, right at the very top.
Great. Before I get to some of the others that are in here, Scott, I just thought Leanne's been doing an amazing job of answering questions in the chat and clarifying some things, but I was wondering if you could just especially for the purposes of the recording, clarify what are the grant periods for year 1 and year 2 of operating support, just so everyone has those in their minds.
Correct. That's a good point, Amber. So your contract will have a year worth of openness. Your use of funds will have an 18-month use of openness and activity. So all those organizations that got grants in the first go round of Cultural Fund were given a grant period of 12/22 of 21, December 22nd of 21 through 12/21 of 22. It's been a tongue twister for the entire time, but you have a full year. But because these funds were obligated last fiscal year, we're allowing you to use funds from July 1, when the state year started, July 1 of 21, all the way to 12/21 of 22, basically 18 months. So if you want to assign some use of funds to things that happened pre-award date in year 1, that is fine. Salary or other bills that you would like to obligate to this expense. The same thing will be the case going forward. Your grant period this year is looking like it's going to be 12/21 of 22 going to 12/20 of 23, and you'll have from July 1 of 22 all the way through 12/20 of 23 to use your funds. So another 18-month use. So if you've exhausted all your year 1 funds, and there are some things you would hope to pick up for the state's bill that have already happened this year since July 1 or about to happen in October, you can retroactively assign use to these funds when you're awarding them.
Great. Thank you, Scott. As long as you're not double dipping, it's good.
Yeah, don't spend $1 twice.
Again, Leanne is addressing some of the more specific, I would say, to particular organizations in the chat. Leanne, are there any here that you would sort of call out and highlight as things that, would be good for everyone to hear about?
No, I think that the 2 main threads that we're seeing are questions about, again, eligibility, which I will give our email addresses at the end, and feel free to reach out if you have specific questions about your organization's eligibility. And also a couple questions again about when are the due dates, when are the grant periods. And so like Scott said, since we have 2 different years, there are 2 different sets of deadlines, and the years that I put in there with that 12/21/22 only applies for people who currently have the grant and not for the year 2 funding.
I'm seeing the unique identity number here. So
let's talk about that.
UEIs are the bane of our existence. We didn't create them. We're not mandating them. These are state funds. So actually, are we asking for the UEI here, Leanne? Or no?
No.
We're not even asking for the UEI for Cultural Fund. So if you're having UEI banging your head against the wall moments, at this time, we're not needing it for operating support. You will not need to worry about it for this grant line. I know others have other grants with us that ultimately come from federal funding, and for federal dollars now, it is a requirement, whether you got it directly from the federal or as a pass through another organization like us, to have a UEI. The UEI system is just a mess, and places are having all kinds of trouble getting their number. If everything worked out fine and all of your information in their system matches up to all of the information that you have, inevitably getting a UEI is not hard. But when one little thing is off, like your address has changed or your year of incorporation is off in their system, you end up in this limbo that is tough to get out of. We are guiding some places, and Leanne, if you want to post the guidance there, it inevitably sends you to a help desk kind of situation that is not very helpful and is not responsive as much as we would like. I'm hoping that this backlog, which again is not just a Connecticut problem, it's a 50 state, 6 territory, full nation kind of problem, will start to resolve itself over time. We're not holding up anybody's anything right now because of inability to have a UEI. We're just asking everyone in their own best faith for the grant lines that we have that require it. Try to get it. When you got it, let us know, and we'll update our system for you. But again, it's not going to be needed for the cultural fund. And if anyone here has any tips or tricks that they could share to others that, you know, help them get it resolved, by all means, add it in the chat. We'll take all we can get and share it along as well.
Yeah. Thanks, Scott. A couple of questions have come through that I just want to highlight as well. You do not need to have applied for year 1 in order to receive year 2.
Correct.
This
in fact,
is,
we hope that if you are an eligible organization that for whatever reason wasn't able to come in for year 1, you will be here for year 2. The
do you
only
want to
difference
talk
is
a little bit about why?
why. Because this is money that we're trying to dedicate, trying to demonstrate to the state is needed, that all of our state's organizations that are eligible can and will benefit from, that we're reaching 169 Connecticut cities and towns. I think we reached 137 last year, which means we only missed out on 32. We would love to pick up the Historical Society or small arts organization, which inevitably exists, Historic House, in those other 32, so that we can be in all communities, and every legislator will find that their community was served by these funds. And again, the more we have a good census of how many organizations we have and what our full organizations sector needs are, the better we can advocate on funding on your behalf.
Thank you. I think that's a really important point, and is one of the reasons that you know, that this grant opportunity has been so important, and why we really want everyone who is eligible to be a part of this. If you are eligible, you will receive funds. So there is no reason not to apply if you are eligible. I think Leanne is, like, you know, fast and furious with the answers. And doesn't, basically, I don't think we have any pending questions in the chat right now. Was thinking this might be a good moment to open things up to some live questions. And people can, you know, if you just want to use the hand raising function or wave your hand around. I have so many screens. I think using the hand raising function in Zoom is good. I'm not sure how you do that on the phone. Does anyone remember what the code is for that? It's like star.
If you, on the phone. I was gonna say, if you're on the computer and you don't know, if you click reactions, there's a raise hand function there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about on the phone.
Yeah.
All
right, it looks like Terry's got a question. Go ahead, Terry, unmute yourself and please ask.
Yes, I just want to know if the Good to Great grant program might be coming out similarly this fall, or is that something on hold?
So Terry brings up,
you asked, you're going to be sorry, Scott. You told me about that.
No, I'm not. We want organizations like yours to apply. So for those who are not familiar, Good to Great is a whole different grant program that has been run by the Department of Economic and Community Development for 2 rounds of applications over the last 5 or so years. It is capital support for building projects largely that will help a smaller to mid-sized organization through an infusion of state funds transform their operations and be able to serve their public. If they were doing it good, hopefully being able to do it great at the end of this project. There will be a 3rd round of Good to Great funding made available this fiscal year. Connecticut Humanities will be partnering with the Office of the Arts and State Historic Preservation Office and tourism departments to administer these funds this go round. We are actually in the back and forth right now. Leanne and I have crafted a draft application and draft guidelines, and we're working with the state on getting those finalized so that we can go live. There are some internal things that the state needs to work out because these are going to be bond funds. So they do not have all of the things checked off to be able to go live with this program yet. We are anticipating this program will go live for applications at some point this fall, with applications depending on how early we can go live.
The bonded funds means we'll have to go through the bond commission, or the amount you're going after goes through the bond commission and then you guys distribute it. How does this work?
It is funds, there's a pot, but they're going after additional funds that go before the bond commission. And then there are, just because it's bond funds, there are rules to be able to open up a grant line with use of even obligated bond funds that are being checked off right now. The goal is to have applications due in January. That might start to shift out depending the later we are able to go live. The goal is to be able to make award announcements before the end of this fiscal year, before the end of June 30th. And these are large grants that can go up to, Leanne, correct me if I'm wrong here, $500,000 for the top award. And there is minimal match. If you are looking for a small grant of up to $50,000, there will be no match. And then it's a 1-to-4 match, a one quarter match for grants that are seeking above $50,000. So this is a great opportunity to re-roof your historic property, build a handicapped accessible ramp, regrade your parking lot so that you've got good access or outside lighting. There's a whole host of things. And again, we're not going to be making award decisions, but we will run the grants through our system, it's looking like, and turn information over to the state for them to make awards. And we in the state will share more in the coming weeks, but we're not quite there yet.
Thank you.
Thanks, Terry.
This is
Donna, go
Good to
ahead and
great.
ask
Guys.
your question.
For
Hi,
Dean's
guys. Thanks
question,
for all this. Sorry.
yeah, it's
For all this
for,
great
for,
information.
for Dean's question, it's good to great. GOODTOGREAT. You could Google good to great CT grants right now.
I can find the link, Scott, and pop it in there.
For the last, but it won't be for the current. It'll be for the previous.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, guys. I'm going to ask you to help just clarify once again. You talked about the under 5K rule for capital/tangible items with this particular fund. Can you just confirm that? I'm sorry. I was excited to hear that. I just didn't know if that was the case.
Yes. So if you have capital expenditures that you want to obligate your funds towards, any one of those should have a max of $5,000 going towards it. So if you needed a huge new HVAC system or something, we can start using portions of this money to go towards it. But the goal is to not be paying the full boat of capital expenses, up to $5,000 for any one capital expense.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Donna. Any other questions?
We could always, if we've exhausted the
end
questions, we
early.
could end the formal recording, and then Leanne and I could hang around for another 15 minutes or so to answer individual questions. Would musical instruments for an after-school music program be considered a capital expense? And this is that gray area here. And my answer to that is no. If you are an organization and that is part of your mission, those are programmatic expenses. Those are not capital expenses. And this is where it gets really gray. We do not want to limit your programmatic ability here, but it's not a program that's intended necessarily to, replace all of your organization's windows with energy efficient windows. So this is kind of the dividing line. If it's mission specific and it's programmatic expenses, we're probably going to say there's no ceiling limit there. And when you've got specific questions like that, just run it by Leanne and I, and we'll get you the best answer, or run it up the flagpole. If we can't get it for you, we'll get it from others that can.
Great. We are recording this, and Emily's going to send a follow-up email to everyone who registered with a link and information, a link to how to apply for the grant and everything like that. We'll also be putting it on our YouTube channel, and I assume Connecticut Humanities will also be including a link on their page as well once the recording's up to this info session. So we'll be getting this out to everyone in every way that we can.
And yes, William, it is saying it's suspended until further notice. We are working behind the scenes on a third round that has not been greenlit and has not been made live. So we're giving you a preview of what is likely to come. but you cannot find information on it because we have not been given the approval to finalize everything and make it live. But the intent is to have this line go live with applications in the next few weeks to months.
Great. Jean DeSmet asks, we need a new website, which will cost more than $5,000. We need to hire a designer, programmer, and pay staff. How much could this grant cover?
The whole cost of your website overhaul. It's an IT expense related to your mission and work there.
Jean, I also want to emphasize that we can't say at this point how much your organization would receive through this grant because we don't know yet. There is a percentage that we can't calculate until we received all of the applications. The minimum award is $5,000. It may be higher than that. It depends on your organization's operating expenses.
And I can't make any guarantees, as Leanne said, but let's say you were an organization that got a $10,000 award. Okay. Last year. The first 5,000 is going to be the same. I would have anything over that. So you might expect to get a $7,500 award, the $5,000 plus half of the rest of your award. If you got a $50,000 grant last year, you might want to pencil in thinking you're going to get about a $27,000 award this year, 5,000 plus half of the rest of the award. We have half the funds to spend. I'm guessing that second half is going to be cut in half. And that's just a rough estimate for budgeting purposes. It is not a guarantee. It might end up being less than that. It might end up being a little bit more depending on your organization's finances and the number of organizations that come in for grants this year. All right, I've got three things
Scott.
here. I've got Google Pixel 4a 5G. You don't have a name.
Google
it
Pixel
might be
4.
me. Is
There
that
you
me?
go. Go ahead.
Hello?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my name is John McCarthy. I'm from Teach Kids Music, an organization. We help young children get into music, and we're thinking about applying for the grant. And I just was awarded for my piano, a piano reading method called Key Tab. And what it is a strip that goes behind any electronic keyboard or piano, and then there's a color-coded sheet music that goes with it, and it allows children to learn songs really quickly and easily, songs and progressions. And we wanted to add this as part of our mission for the Teach Kids Music, and I was wondering how we could maybe apply for the grant for using this Key Tab music system to get implemented into school systems in Connecticut.
So if you are a 501c3 nonprofit, you are eligible to apply. And then if you wanted to use your award for these systems, you are able to do so. If you are hoping that schools will be investing in this, I think that's a whole nother thing. Schools aren't eligible to apply to us in their own right. So you would have to be determining if you're going to be deploying these in certain school systems you're in, keeping them for your own purposes and bringing them with you. If that's making sense here, it's for you and your operation and your costs. Even though you're in the schools, you have to determine whether this is one of your own expenses or how that need is it something for the school to meet, or is it something for you to meet with your own funds?
No, this is for right now. We're doing a Little Rockers class, and we're involved with some school systems, and we've gotten a grant in the past for getting the books and the getting instructors to help teach these classes. And we want to expand this to the piano for the patent that I have now. It's just to make the Key Tab note strips that we could put into school systems. We could offer them to the school system so they could help the kids learn how to play piano.
It sounds like programmatic expenses to me that would be eligible, yes.
And printing books up that would be used, that we give to the schools, offer to the schools and things like that.
Yep.
Yeah,
All
that's
eligible.
that's what we were looking for, to print the books up, to get the key strap strips, and even to have instructors come in to teach, to show how the system works. It's pretty simple, but just to,
Yep, no, that all sounds like your educational programmatic expenses, so that would be fine.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Janet, I see you next up here.
Yes, so I'm wondering, are you going to be comparing organizational goals and priorities? If we were grant recipients for year one, are you going to compare those to our set organizational goal and priorities to year 2? I'm also, these are a lot of little questions, but are you utilizing survey results to identify the impact of our activities in that year 1? And with the final report year 1, and I haven't looked at it, closely, and I shouldn't ask this, but are you examining the priorities and itemized award spending in relation to the stated priorities in that grant 1? So I'm sorry if these are a lot of things about just the priorities and the comparison between year 1 and year 2, and even our post-grant survey. Are you looking at the impact of our activities as we laid them out or projected in that first application?
So I think the answer to your question is yes, in some regards, but probably not in the way that you're asking, if that makes sense. We're not holding you in what you're saying or what you said you were going to do and what you did in accountability in some sort of way. As long as you're still using your funds on eligible expenses, that's all we want to make sure and determine. We are hoping that everyone, to the best of their ability in whatever area they do, will understand the legislature's goals and priorities of employment, K through 12 education, and digital infrastructure. And in an ideal world, find some way to support those legislative priorities in the use of the funds so that when you report back out, we can start to talk about how many organizations writ large use these funds and what dollar amounts to support K through 12 education or to do digital infrastructure or used it on paying people in Connecticut. So we will take your aggregate 632 responses and start to look at how we pushed the needle, but it's not going to come back and impact you and your organization and your award amount in year 2 in any way positively or negatively. But again, it benefits us all the more we can remember what the legislative priorities are and using of the funds in those ways and talking about the impact we've had, because then we can go back to the legislature and tell them how we moved the needle in their priority ways. Barbara, I think you're up next.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Question for you on the use of funds going back 18 months, which would be to 7/1/21.
Yes.
Question is, if you have not spent all of your funds for this year's grant on your number 1 priority, can you go back and add from the other 2 that you picked?
Again, you are not held to any of the priorities that you articulated there. You can obligate your funds on any activities that were eligible that took place from July 1 of 21 through what's going to be 12/21 of this year. If you can obligate those funds against personnel, K through 12 education, or digital activities, all the better, but there is no need to do so. It does not need to be in your first priority area. It could be your first and second priority area. It could be something other than that. As long as it's eligible, it's fine. And when you've obligated and spent all the funds at that point and you're ready to close out, and we'll get you the last 25% of your reward.
For this year?
For this year.
Okay, so it's 7/1/21 is the date.
Earliest date of activities that if you wanted to apply funds towards would be eligible.
Okay, good. Excellent clarification. Thank you.
Yep. Is it Sima or Seema? I don't want to mispronounce your name.
That's okay. Seema, you were close. You were
Seema.
good. So I represent the Jewish Historical Society of Fairfield County. And while we had hoped to spend our money on hiring people, we didn't. But we did use the money in a wide variety of other areas. We had 2 major projects that we were working on, both of which had gotten grants from the Cultural Alliance, or actually the Fairfield County Cultural Group Council, I believe it is. I didn't do those grants. I did this one. And so we spent money in that area, which is a little bit different than what we had focused on, which were the people, I guess. So my question is a little bit more broader. It's more of, we're a small organization. We're trying to figure out how to grow. Okay. We've been around for 40 years. This is our upcoming 40th anniversary, and it's always been a fun historical organization where we've created projects. And the biggest thing that we did, which turned into a documentary, is Remembering the Family Store, Stamford circa 1940 to 1965, which is actually playing at the Avon Theater currently. And we want to be able to make more of those, but we also want to be able to figure out ways and get some grants or funding to really hire like an executive director, that kind of thing. Like, while we were going to focus that money for an executive director, we utilized all our volunteers, and we actually got a couple more that were in development and other areas to be able to utilize and cover ourselves for this year. So I guess the question is, and I think the other people, you answered the questions of the other people, which pertains to me, but I'm just wondering from a larger perspective, what is there out there for us?
This is the age-old question here. I mean, it's tough to get operating support funds in general. Most grant organizations, and ours included historically, have provided project funds, which sometimes can go towards
Right.
staffing, sometimes not. And even if it can, it's towards the staffing of the project that's at question.
Exactly. That's
So, you know, our hope and part of what we're making arguments to the legislature is if your goal is of taking places that are all volunteer and enabling them to at least have a part-time paid staff member, or for those places that have a part-time paid staff member and to have their first paid full-time staff member, two things are needed. One is some sort of reliability and continuity of funds that is not so, you know, coming and going. And we know we've got this for two funds, but it's tough to invest in staffing if you're not sure that funds are going to be there in years 3 and 4. So we need some sort of steady support and you know, agreement that these are going to coming and going, that they're going to be here for 3, 4, 5 years. And then increase of funds, you know, $5,000 we know doesn't necessarily allow a place to bring on even a part-time help. So these are things we're aware of because there aren't a lot of other recommendations. I mean, Seema, there's not one place I can say, if you need staffing, go to this place. These are unique funds. They are enabling places to do it. But if we want to have places staff up, $5,000 isn't going to really do it. So we're
exactly.
we're appreciative of these funds, but we're understanding of the reality of the world.
Okay, yeah. So so basically what we're looking, we're downgrading. So maybe someone, you know, to be part-time, yeah, and use a piece of that. We've also, I mean, with our documentary, our income has grown tremendously. We also started another program that goes specifically to K-12 schools this year. So we've had 2 very successful programs that are continuing, and we hope to do a documentary for the, you know, for the city of Stamford Family Store kind of situation as well. So, you know, we're looking at other things. And I see some things over here in the
I
in the
think
chat, which I'm going to copy down.
Let's have a larger conversation than we can do here about your organization and give you some guidance. And we can either do that at one of the info sessions that David Green is setting up for Cultural Alliance of Fairfield County, or do a one-on-one with you. But I see we're at 1 and there's one more hand up.
Would
So I'd like to
love
get to
that.
Shannon's question.
Great. Perfect. Thank you so much. I'll reach out.
And Shannon?
Hi, thank you. I'm with Guilford Community Television. We are a public access station, and just in having looked at your website, it seems that there aren't many, if any, public access stations that have applied for your funds. We are 501. This would be our first time applying to Connecticut Humanities and to this fund specifically, because I wasn't aware that it existed last year. Basically, our mission is to help the community share their stories with each other through, originally television is how, cable television is how we got started, but we're trying to expand from that, recognizing that a lot of the community is leaving cable for internet-based programming. So, but we've showcased authors, we've showcased people who've written their own plays and are performing them on video, that sort of thing.
So
Would
we have funded a couple organizations, and we can talk more about your activities offline, but
Sure.
you know, WPKN and a few others that were able to articulate in their application the arts and cultural programming that they're either putting on the radio or on TV is what we really want to see and be able to highlight in the application and on your website. If you are one of the public access type places that is really covering, let's say, local politics and not a lot of other, I'm not saying that's what you do, but if you're mainly covering local politics and you're not getting into that cultural programming, probably not a good fit, not a likelihood of, you know, getting funding. But if you can articulate the cultural ways that you're sharing programming through your distribution methods, that would be helpful. And that's why WPKN and a couple others were able to get funding last year.
Okay. Thank you.
I know we're at 1:02 here too, so I can hang around for a few more moments, but I think we should probably end the recording. Thank Amherst and Emily and Leanne, and all of our friends, Liz Shapiro and everyone at the Office of the Arts for their collaboration here. Thank you all for coming to hear today and to learn more, and know that we're just a phone call or an email away for any additional questions you have. And if your questions are answered, great. If not, come to one of our other info sessions and we'll keep helping you out there.
Thank you, everybody. I'll just close by echoing what Amherst had mentioned before. So this will be recorded and it will be sent to everybody who has registered for this event. So be on the lookout for a follow-up email from me. It'll have a recording as well as some of the links that we had shown earlier. And also we will be including a transcript of the chat log as well, so we can go back and reference any questions that people had had. So be on the lookout for that. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Leanne. Thanks, Emily. Thanks to you all for being here and for the incredible work that you do in all of your communities.